And we have a new panel here. It's Patsy Carter, Missouri Department of Mental Health. Also Bledsoe, board member from Marys County. And John Warner, Emergency Planning Coordinator, Center for Education Safety here with the MSBA. And let's talk about something that maybe doesn't get talked about a lot, and that's behavioral risk assessment. Before something bad happens, you know, we always say the warning signs. Were there warning signs? And I know, Amy, you're a board member there. What's being discussed on your end in your county?
Well, I'm very excited to be a consultant for the Center for Education Safety, and for the past year we have been working on bringing a Missouri model of behavioral risk assessment to all of our schools in the state of Missouri. We focus on building a team comprised of an administrator, a teacher, a school counselor, social worker, or nurse, and the school resource officer or law enforcement officer. So we bring them in for a full day training and teach them the evidence-based practice based on the Sigma model, which is utilized in the state of Virginia. And that's exactly what it's about. We want to look for signs and in our students or our members of our community where they might be on the path to violence, and we want to mitigate that by providing resources to help avoid that.
But that's tricky, isn't it? Because you don't want to misidentify or label somebody. How do we delicately, and it's not just because we're in a PC world, but how do you gently kind of say, we're concerned about your son or daughter? Is there an easy way to go about that?
Easy?
No, okay, nothing's easy.
Probably not. So I came from the world of law enforcement. I was a school resource officer for 13 years. One of the things that I constantly had happen was teachers telling me about a specific kid and the behaviors that kid would show in the class that were concerning to them. Then I would go to that kid's other teachers and find that it wasn't just that one class. So it wasn't about that teacher, which is always what a teacher sort of, they internalize it. They say it's about what I'm doing in the class and what can I do to better help this kid. But we were finding that those kids were doing some of those same behaviors in other classes. So that starts to form that process of, so there's some issues going on with this kid that are beyond what the school traditionally can do. So can we coalesce around them and give them some ideas, talk with the families, pull the families into it too, because that's the key issue of connecting the schools and the families together. And it's that team approach that is able to do that. You've got your administration, you've got the teacher or teachers themselves. School resource officer, all I found that I was doing for the most part was being a conduit for that process. It's not about arrest or enforcement actions. It's about getting that kid what they need, and they don't always know what they need. So coalescing that team around them to try and manage that process.
You know, in the world today, they always tell us, see something, say something. But I think in high school especially, kids are going to be, well, I don't want to get in trouble, and I don't want to be a snitch. I mean, how do you work around that?
Well, the way that most states are doing it, and Missouri, we're working toward this process, is to have an anonymous way for kids to send information out. And it's, quite frankly, in the world today, it's going to be a text or a social media process for that. They're not going to call on the phone, and they're unlikely to come to you directly or in person unless they know you specifically. That's, again, one of the reasons why having those bridge building processes, having a school resource officer who gets in with the kids, and it's not just an enforcement issue, it's a school climate and culture issue that you want to have. But kids, they don't want to say in person, but they will text. They will send anonymous text to give you information, because anytime an incident is about to occur, any of the dangerous incidents that we've seen around the country, they always talk to somebody, and the somebody that they always talk to are peers. Now, they sometimes talk with clergy and teachers and other staff members, things like that, but they always talk to peers. And if we can get those peers to understand that the things that they hear are concerning to us, not just in an enforcement or a getting the kid in trouble process, but we need to get them some help. We need to find some way to buoy that kid up so that a dangerous issue is not in the offing. And we can do that. We can do a lot of that by working before the incident occurs.
And there's no guarantee that anything will prevent something, but we still have an obligation, everybody does, to do the most that we can. Patsy, I'm curious from your position with the Missouri Department of Mental Health, how tough is it for teachers, administrators who aren't trained mental health experts to kind of know the signs or to engage?
That's always an issue that's brought to our attention from teachers and school administrators. And one of the things that we're doing in response to that is recognizing that many of the students have significant histories of trauma. And that puts them at risk, both in not being able to learn and to not be able to regulate their emotions or their behaviors. So we have many schools across the state now that are joining together in collaboratives to become trauma-informed schools, which basically means that that whole school understands the prevalence and impact of trauma, understands the recovery pathways to heal from that trauma, and that they take that information and integrate it into their practices, their policies, and their environment, and then try to avoid re-traumatizing. So it's making it a very safe place for these students to be able to learn. And with that, in conjunction with what others were saying, it's about that relationship, that we need to have the students and the school staff having strong relationships where they feel safe, because they may not feel safe anywhere else, whether they're living in a violent neighborhood or a home where there's poverty or violence, or the kids have experienced tornadoes and flooding, which all impacts their brain development, which then impacts their ability to learn, as well as their behavioral and emotional
So
control.
what's appropriate if you're a teacher, administrator, and you think, boy, that kid looks, like might be dealing with something. How do you not get sued in this world? I mean, how do you approach that? What's your advice even to the school folks about how to deal with it?
Well, it's not easy, and it's not something that you can just automatically do, because it does depend upon having that relationship. One of the first steps that we say to any organization trying to become trauma-informed, because this goes across not only education, child welfare, juvenile justice, et cetera, is to kind of shift your view from what's wrong with that child, which is what we typically do. We immediately say they're aggressive or they're using drugs or what's wrong with them, and really start thinking about what has happened to them and understanding how that changes their perception of authority and their ability to learn, again, as I had mentioned, as well as their ability to control their behaviors.
And Amy, as a school board member, what do you hear from parents? I mean, there are a lot of issues that they want to address. Has this become a bigger issue?
It does. It is an issue in every district, and every time in our 24/7 media cycle that we see an event has occurred, a tragedy somewhere, it does bring it to the forefront. And it's important that every school have a crisis plan that covers all types of crises, including something like an active shooter or an intruder. And like the other panelists have alluded to, we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs from Psychology 101, and we know that we have to meet those basic needs of all of our students, and for them to be safe before they can learn. And for that matter, for our teachers to teach, they need to also feel safe. So it's, we have talked about districts can adopt a policy, they can write a policy to include this. They can also fold the behavioral risk assessment into their crisis plan. One thing as school board members and administrators, budget is always an issue. So our behavioral risk assessment training through the Missouri Center for Education Safety is extremely low cost, and the team can be trained up and immediately walk away ready to implement it with everything they need the next day.
How do we all get on the same page? And Amy, I think you said a word during the break, collaboration is key.
It absolutely is. And when we talk about collaboration, we're not talking only about the team members for each school building in each district. We're talking about the school community as a whole, all of the teachers, all of the faculty and staff. We need to build relationship with our students and with the families of our students. Also, that goes out into our houses of worship, our faith-based community, mental health agencies, private practices, law enforcement, and, just everybody in the community. We want to be able to know that whenever our student has a need, we can go and find a place to have that need fulfilled.
And what do you do with the kids that don't come forward or aren't obvious? And I know, John, you're sort of the security expert. And for lack of a better term, right? But how do you identify? Are there warning signs? Are teachers being educated now before they even get in front of the kids on what to look for?
Well, and that's exactly what Amy's trying to do, is bring those teams together so that the teachers who connect to those teams in the schools can then know what is it that I need to look for. You know, one of the things that we talked about in the first segment was safety at the schools. I can tell you that most kids, the vast majority, feel very safe at their schools, and the example of that I can give is a kid who runs away from home will come to school. Many, many times as a school resource officer, we solved our runaway cases by just looking for them at school, because that's where they'll come to, because they feel a sense of safety. No matter what else is going on in their lives, it's a touchstone. It's something that's absolutely rock solid for them, that they know those people in that school district and in that school building care for them and will keep them safe. We need to follow that thought process that the kids have up with the actual action for that too, and show them that not only when you have an issue at home, you can come to us and we can help you with that process, whether it's a home issue, whether it's homelessness, whether it's food on the table, whether it's, you know, an unsafe neighborhood, whatever it is, there are resources out there. And kids don't always see that. Kids rarely see that, quite frankly. They don't look beyond their own little world. We have to be the ones who show them that we've got those processes in place, that we've got those resources in place for them, because a school can't have all of the resources. They have to reach out to other areas in their communities. Knowing what those areas are is sometimes the trick. Is who is it that is in our community that can help? Is it a faith-based? Are there some organizations that what they do is this process that maybe we don't know so much about? I discovered as a school resource officer, we had an organization in town that was cataloging homelessness. They were and some of those were our kids. There was no other agency, no other entity that we could connect with that was doing as much as this nonprofit organization was doing in terms of connecting with the homeless populations. It's big in districts.
And
they
Pat,
need to have that information.
And Patsy, I'm wondering too, the Department of Mental Health, are they reaching out to schools too, so that because the teachers don't always know? They're not mental health experts, they're educators.
Right.
So is there, from your department too, trying to get into the schools and educate the educators?
Yes, we're always trying to find ways to bring more services into the schools, or at least have them linked to the schools, so that there's a strong partnership between mental health providers and the schools. And again, in a trauma-informed school, we're trying to understand those needs of those children that have the most serious reactions to their trauma, so that they can get the services they need and evidence-based practices around trauma. But simultaneously, we want to support the teachers themselves, because not only are the children feeling stressed and experiencing trauma, but the staff are. The turnover rate in teachers, quality teachers, is way too high because they don't feel like they have the tools to meet the needs of children. So we want to put those tools in the teachers' hands, because that's a natural environment for the student. And as was stated, it can be a safe place for them to go. Whereas sometimes if we label them too quickly with mental health issues, that's a label that follows them. It can, again, impact their self-image and their self-esteem. So we want to make it a very collaborative approach, with schools working hand in hand, bringing therapy, but also supporting the teachers.
And we talked a lot about school resource officers, and for our listeners who kids have been out of school for a long time, don't have kids, they may not even understand what that is, but I've seen it in practice. I was out to eat with my nieces and nephews, and they ran over there talking to a police officer, and I thought, oh my God, they're getting in trouble. What did they do? And I went, they go, oh, no, she's at our school. She's at our school. And I think, oh, it's a Kirkwood police officer. No, they all knew her and were friendly, and this is outside of school. They go running over, so clearly there was a relationship there. Does every public school have an on-site police officer?
Absolutely not. It's not as rare as it used to be, but we know that districts need that officer in there, and sometimes the department can't provide it because of budget constraints. Sometimes what we see works about the best is when school districts and their police agencies can get together, whether that's a city agency or whether it's a sheriff's department, to provide some funding from the school district toward having that officer in the building, because it's a large burden for a police department to draw 1 or 2 or 3 of its officers out of its regular contingency of officers that are throughout the city, because they're 24 hours a day. It's a 24-hour a day process, and you got to have enough people to fill those spaces. And to take one or 2 of them out to put them in schools for those periods of time is sometimes more than most police agencies can.
So who pays for it? Do they split the cost? It always goes back to funding. Every roundtable we've had always goes back to funding. Yep. But how does that work?
It's usually a split the cost process. There are some districts that pay for it fully to their police departments. They pay that officer's salary directly to the police department. They're still a police officer. They're still commissioned by that police agency. They're still trained by that agency, because training becomes a big issue, because, with the big L word, liability issues, you always have to have the proper amount of training for everything that you do, whether it's within the school or outside of the school. And so the police agency will usually take on that training process, but ask for some assistance with getting the salaries met for that officers, so that they can also put enough officers on the street to deal with the rest of the population that they have to deal with too.
I will add to that. In our very small school district, pre-K through 12, we have less than 800 students.
And I mentioned Marys County. For people who don't know, you're in between.
We're located off the beaten path between Rolla and Jefferson City, Missouri. Marys County R2 and Bell and Bland. We have our students come from 3 counties: Osage, Marys, and Gasconade. Our school building campuses are located in Bell and also in Bland. The city of Bland no longer has city police department, so they rely on the Gasconade County Sheriff's Department. In Bell, we're fortunate that we have city police, and our officers show up at the beginning of school and at the end of school, and not only are our city police, but also our county sheriff's departments and the Missouri State Highway Patrol. And the Missouri State Highway Patrol has this new initiative where they're allowing their officers time to go into the school districts just simply to get to know everybody, because we're working on improving that, reducing that stigma and improving that relationship between law enforcement and our communities. And one of the best ways to do that is get to down there at the children's level and to let our children know that law enforcement officers are here to protect us, and they are our friends. So in our district, we are very pleased, as many other districts are, that we invite them in. As a school board member, I am more than happy to pay for their breakfast or lunch or whatever. We invite them for special events, and they just randomly come and do walkthroughs through our building. And that helps to reduce that stigma and improve that relationship.